Welcome back to 21 Grams. Right before I sat down to record this, life threw something at me I wasn't expecting. Nothing dramatic, just one of those small disruptions that kind of knocks your rhythm off beat. It reminded me how quickly the ground can shift under your feet. How you can feel steady one moment, then suddenly you're standing there wondering if you should even keep going. For a second, I felt myself tighten up. I was frustrated, thrown off. I was questioning whether I should even hit record at all. But then I remembered what this space really is. This is not a stage, it's not a performance. It's a room we step into with whatever weight the day handed us. This isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about showing up even when the edges of your day feel frayed. So if you're listening right now, just know I'm here with you in the middle of the mess. Not above it, not beyond it. Just right here. Right here, learning how to breathe through it. And before we go any further, I want to meet you where you are. This is the first episode of a new year. And instead of rushing into resolutions, instead of declaring who we're going to be, the things we're going to accomplish, I just want to say, Happy New Year. Happy 2026. I'm not saying this in a loud way, not in the fireworks and countdowns kind of way, but in a way that honors everything you've carried across the line into this year. The versions of yourself that you had to leave behind, lessons you didn't get to name, and the weight you didn't drop at midnight but chose to keep understanding instead of judging. If you made it here feeling hopeful, I'm glad you're here. If you made it here feeling tired, you still belong here. Remember that this year doesn't need you to reinvent yourself. It just needs you to be honest about where you are. So as we step into 2026 together, let this be a soft entry. No pressure, no performance, just presence. In the last episode, I read a letter to myself. I said something out loud that's been sitting quietly in my chest for a long time. I said that I'm not that person anymore. But what I didn't talk about then was what happens after you say something like that. Because saying it feels powerful. But the moment right after, that part is quieter than anyone warns you about. So tonight, I want to talk about that space. That moment when the words already left your mouth and you're standing there thinking, okay, now what? There's a moment I think a lot of us know well. I call this moment the closet mirror moment. It's a moment when you're alone, maybe in a bathroom, maybe in your bedroom, maybe standing in front of a closet mirror. You're not getting ready. You're not getting ready for anything. You're not fixing your appearance. You're just looking. You're not looking at your face, but you're looking at your life. And that's when it hits you. You've changed. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that anyone claps for. You've changed quietly. And here's the part that people don't really talk about. Think about it as when you reach for something that you've worn 100 times before. That jacket, that shirt, those jeans, the mindset, the role you always play. And it fits, but it doesn't feel right. It's not small, it's not uncomfortable, it's just wrong. Kind of like wearing an outfit that still zips, but it no longer represents who you are. And it no longer represents who you are when you walk outside with it. You don't even want to try it on. So you stand there a little longer than you need to. What do you do when you stand there? You're trying things on, you're taking them off, you're putting them back. But this is not because you don't have options. but because you're realizing some things only made sense when you were trying to survive, not evolve. You start thinking to yourself, I don't want to dress my life the same way anymore. That moment right there, that's the growth. That's what feels powerful when you say, I am not that person anymore. They say that after clarity comes quiet, not peace, not relief, just that small, unsettling quiet that shows up when the noise finally steps aside. That looks like when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop filling every gap with words. That feels like when you stop reaching for the distractions you used to lean on. And then after all of that, suddenly there's space. A kind of space you didn't ask for, but one that you can't ignore. And then something shifts. That quiet aftergrowth feels like turning down the volume in your car. Not all the way off, just low enough that you can finally hear the engine again. At first, that quiet is uncomfortable. But it's uncomfortable because you didn't realize how loud everything has been. The music you're playing, the podcast you're listening to, the calls you're taking, all of those little ways we drown out the sound of our own soul knocking. But once the volume drops, you start noticing things. If we keep the example of the car, you start noticing the that rattle that you was pretending that wasn't there, that warning light you've been hoping would disappear on its own, or the feeling you've been postponing. You know, that feeling that keeps tapping your shoulder. That most people, from my experience, they just turn the volume back up. Not because everything is okay, but because listening asks something of you. But you didn't. I didn't. We stayed with it. You let the quiet speak. And that's when this space feels heavy. Not because it's wrong, but because it's honest. Part of that is that one of the strangest parts of growth is realizing how much you're letting go of without making a big deal about it. You don't make a big announcement. You don't say a goodbye speech. There's no dramatic exit. You just stop. What does that look like? You just stop. It looks like replying slower to texts that used to stress you out. It looks like leaving conversations without explaining why you're done. It looks like going home earlier, but not because you're tired, but because you're full. It looks like when you stop forcing what no longer fits. It looks like you stop staying out. You stop proving that you belong or trying to prove that you belong. And sometimes you wonder if that makes you cold or distant or selfish. But you're not disappearing, you're conserving. You're learning that not everything deserves access to you anymore. And that change right there, that's one of the strongest things you can feel. It's one of the strongest things you can understand. When you finally learn that not everything deserves access to you anymore, that's when you can clearly say, I'm not that person anymore. That's change and that's growth. But like everything, the old you always tries to come back. After you say, I'm not that person anymore, the old version of you doesn't just vanish. And believe me, it checks in. It checks in on your tired days, on your lonely nights, on the moments when being familiar feels easier than being aligned. Old habits that start knocking softly, but not to sabotage you, just because they're familiar. Old dynamics try to restart. Old versions of yourself start to whisper, you know how to do this. I want you to really listen to the next line I'm going to say. The old version of you doesn't disappear, it just stops being in charge. I'm going to say it again. The old version of you, it doesn't disappear, it stops being in charge. That pullback towards what you know, that doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're choosing differently. And that's what change looks like. But there's a space where you want to change, you want to mature, you want to be different. And I call that space the in between. And I learned that we have to trust the in between because that part matters. The in between, that part matters. You're not who you were, but you haven't fully settled into who you're becoming. And that's the part that no one prepares you for. This space, the in between, is like moving into a new place and walking through it in the dark. You bump into walls, you misjudge distances, you reach for light switches that aren't there. Not because the house is wrong, but because your body hasn't learned the layout yet. And here's the truth beneath all of it: becoming someone new is like watching a sunrise. The sky brightens long before the warmth reaches your skin, right? You can see the world changing long before you feel the change in yourself. That learning, it takes time. And that's what's happening right now. You're not lost. You're memorizing the room. So let me ask you something. What feels heavy right now? What feels heavy right now? Because you're carrying something that no longer belongs to you. What are you holding on to out of habit? What are you holding on to out of habit, not alignment? Think about it like this. Sometimes growth, it isn't about becoming more. It's about needing less. Sometimes growth isn't about becoming more. It's about needing less. Before you, I'm going to say it one more time. Sometimes growth isn't about becoming more. It's about needing less. Before we wrap tonight, I want to leave you with a moment to breathe, a moment to check in with yourself. Because if today taught me anything, it's that we don't always get to choose the weight that we wake up with, but we do get to choose how we carry it. So wherever you are, driving, walking, sitting in your room, take a second, slow down, feel your feet on the ground, feel your breath settle. And here's the reflection I want to leave with you tonight. What part of you needs attention right now? Not tomorrow, not when things calm down, but right now. Sit with that, let it rise, let it speak, and when you're ready, put it down gently. You don't have to hold everything all at once. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Thank you for showing up for yourself, for this space, for the way you're learning to name Until then, take care of your soul. This was 21 Grams, the podcast. First episode of the new year. And like always, I'll be right here for the next conversation.